Hey guys, here is your strange, completely relaxed in this small, gloomy studio that smells like cold coffee and yesterday's food. Just me and the microphone, and I'm staring at you through the screen because I know you're there with your headphones on, probably in the dark, and you're wondering what the hell happened at the BAFTAs. Man, if you haven't seen the clip yet, stop everything and watch it now. Because this is not a made-up Hollywood drama. This is the raw, unfiltered dirt that exploded on February 22, 2026 at the Royal Festival Hall in London, and how a freight train hit, which no one saw coming. Or wait a minute, maybe they did, and they just didn't care. Just imagine, the hall is packed to the brim with the biggest names in the film industry, chandeliers shining brightly, the air is filled with expensive perfume mixed with the nervous energy of people who know that a single bad night can end their career. Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, two absolute legends, take the stage to present the first award of the evening, the award for the best visual effects. Both look stunning. Jordan in his elegant black tuxedo that emphasizes his figure like Taylor, with that confident smile he always wears. Lovely right next to him, whose silver beard draws attention, his gaze calm as if he has already experienced every kind of chaos and emerged unscathed. The audience is clapping, cameras are flashing, the teleprompter is running smoothly, everything is going perfectly like clockwork, and then BAM! Loud and crystal clear, the N-word echoes over every single microphone in the hall, screamed at full volume, without muffling, without hesitation, cutting through the applause like a knife. You can see it in slow motion when you zoom into the recording. Jordan's jaw tenses for a split second. Lindo's eyes narrow slightly, but they pull through like the professionals they are and announce the winning title, Avatar, Fire and Ash, or whatever else has won, without batting an eye. But let's be honest, we all know that this isn't just some troublemaker from the cheap seats. That was John Davidson, the 54-year-old Scottish Tourette activist, whose life story was recently adapted in the BAFTA-nominated, award-winning biopic I Swear. He sat there as an honored guest, and his involuntary tics turned the most elegant evening of British cinema into a global scandal, the repercussions of which are still being dealt with. And here, the situation gets really bad from the very beginning, because that wasn't the first outbreak of the evening, not even close. People who were there, insiders who still write to me from their prepaid phones because they're afraid of losing their jobs, swear that Davidson was out of control all evening. He shouted, "Boring!" during the opening speech, fired off curses continuously as a few children's film directors went on stage to receive their award for this film, Boong, or something like that. And the microphones picked up every curse as if it were part of the show. But the N-word, that hit like an atomic bomb, just as two black superstars were in the spotlight presenting. And now here it comes. The BBC had a 2-hour delay in the broadcast. They cut out political jokes. They muted the Free Palestine chant. They even muted the statement of a director who told people to get lost if they hated movies, but this racist insult, they just let it fly into millions of living rooms. Just imagine that. We're talking about the BBC, which loves to praise itself for its sensitivity, and it has decided not to censor that one detail that could have ruined the entire inclusion campaign with Davidson's film. I have leaked production notes, frantic texts from the director, old court records on Tourette cases, dusty interviews from the archive, rumors from PR people who were sweating like hell backstage, and the most disgusting unconfirmed gossip from people who were literally sitting next to him. Rumor has it that the BAFTA staff were informed about Davidson's tics months in advance. There were meetings about seating, microphones, caregivers, the whole program, but they risked everything just to get the sweet PR note of representing people with disabilities. It's authentic. A manager is said to have scrawled in an email that leaked to me. Let the world see the real. Easy to say when it's not your own community being hit by setbacks, right? But before we dive headfirst into that night and the subsequent total betrayal, we need to start from the very beginning. To understand how all of this could happen, one needs the complete, unflinching biography of John Davidson, from his impoverished childhood in the small Scottish town to the moment when everything escalated on stage. John was born around 1971 in Galashiels, this small working town in the Scottish borders, a place where the wind sweeps down from the hills all year round, everyone knows everyone else's business, and anyone who's different is quickly labeled and never forgets it. Even as a small child, he suffered from tics, Uncontrollable blinking, grunting, word repetitions, a true neurological nightmare that no one understood or wanted to deal with in the 1980s. The schools treated him like a problem case back then, took him out of class, sometimes punished him with old-fashioned corporal punishment, and on playgrounds that smelled of wet grass and fear, he was mercilessly bullied by other children. His family was thoroughly working class. His mother did everything to protect him and worked on the side. His father probably toiled as well, but the strain was palpable at every family meal and every doctor's visit, where they were dismissed with, "He's just a little rascal," or "He's just imagining it." People who grew up with him, like the old BBC documentaries about him, describe a boy who wished for nothing more than to belong, to walk the streets without being stared at. But his brain had other plans and fired off outbursts of anger that caused strangers to cross to the other side of the street. When he was 15 or 16 years old, it was 1989. The BBC aired the documentary John is Not Crazy. For weeks, they followed him in gala shells, the cameras right in front of his face, capturing his curses, his groans, and his loneliness, which would break most adults, let alone a teenager. The film was broadcast on March 15, 1989, on BBC One, narrated by Eleanor Bron, and suddenly John became the poster child for Tourette's syndrome in the UK, the face of a disease that most people had never heard of. Insiders who worked on the filming report, according to interviews I have uncovered, that he hated every second of the attention but did it anyway because there was no other way. Years later, the documentary landed in a survey of the 50 best, but for John it was a double-edged sword. Fame brought attention, but also more isolation, more hostility, and the stigma. That's the crazy boy from television. Later, he attempted suicide. Dark phases followed, during which the burden overwhelmed him. He lived with his mother well into his 20s. The medications did numb him, but they did not help against the cause. Finally, at 25 in 1996, after years of misdiagnosis, he received the official diagnosis: Tourette syndrome with coprolalia. This rare condition where the tics also include involuntary swearing and insults that he picks up from his surroundings without control, without a filter, just a short circuit in the brain. But John did not let himself be defeated. He transformed the pain into a life mission, became an activist, spoke at schools, trained police officers, and helped families go through the hell he had experienced himself. In public appearances, where he suffered a tic in the middle of his presentation, he handled it with a brutal honesty that won people over to him. In 2002, the documentary The Boy Can't Help It was released, which followed him at the age of 30 and showcased his development as well as his commitment to raising awareness about Tourette syndrome. In 2009, another documentary followed. In 2019, he received the MBE from Queen Elizabeth II for his services to raising awareness about Tourette syndrome. Palestinian insiders, who still do not dare to speak about it today, report that he suffered a tic during the ceremony and may have even said something unexpected, but the royals reacted professionally and calmly. Those present swear it was one of those moments when everyone held their breath. But John mastered the situation with brilliance and used his illness as a teaching tool. It is rumored that the encounter with the Queen was surreal for the boy from gala shells, who was once bullied in class for grunting, but activism saved him and gave him a sense of purpose after feeling like a freak for years. In 2024, the film I Swear was announced, directed by Kirk Jones. The screenplay and production were carried out with great care to avoid the usual pity trap. It is an empathetic comedy with dramatic elements that showcases the wild, humorous, and human side of life with coprolalia. Robert Aramayo plays the young John and immerses himself deeply in the role, studying the tics and mannerisms, and even spent time with the real John to ensure authenticity. Maxine Peake is also involved, I believe, as a family member or something similar, but the focus is on John's journey from the bullied boy in 1983 in Galashiels to the 25-year-old who was diagnosed in 1996, who still lived at home and fought for his dignity. The production knew from the very beginning how unpredictable the tics were. Loud, sometimes racist or offensive, because his brain controls them without him having a choice. Insiders on set, who fed me details, swear that there were close filming sessions and sensitivity discussions, but they deliberately focused on authenticity because that's what made the story so powerful. The film premieres in Toronto, critics are enthusiastic and praise it as heartwarming and cathartic. It does not sugarcoat the struggle but celebrates the resilience of humanity. At the box office, it brings in $8.2 million, a solid result for an indie biography. For the BAFTA season, he is nominated for 6 awards and wins 3, including allegedly a Rising Star nomination for Aramayo, who referred to John in his acceptance speech as the most remarkable man he has ever met. And here is the first major warning sign in this whole mess, according to sources who were active in the promo area and sent me screenshots of internal BAFTA emails from months before the awards ceremony. The organizers were thoroughly informed about John's condition, possible outbreaks, volume, etc. There were discussions about where he should sit, how to handle the microphones, and even emergency plans in case his tics worsened. Nevertheless, they chose to treat it as an honorary guest and strongly emphasized the inclusion of people with disabilities, as the film was their shining example of progressive storytelling. Authentic representation, it was repeatedly stated in these notes. In an email correspondence I received, there was something like, "John's presence will make the evening unforgettable for the right reasons." Unforgettable, yes, but not in the way they had planned. They took a risk, placing him in the middle of the audience, so close that every microphone in the Royal Festival Hall picked up every tick. And when the N-word was mentioned during the speech by the black moderators, there was absolute silence in the hall. One could smell the change in the air, this mixture of champagne, flowers, and the sudden panic sweat of the executives who realized that their public image had just collapsed. To truly depict the events of that night, we reconstruct it step by step, like the crime scene it had become. The Royal Festival Hall on the south bank of the Thames, glass and steel shining in the sea of London lights. Outside the red carpet, photographers calling names. Inside the hall with its plush seats. The stage with huge screens. The air conditioning hums, but not enough to ease the tension as the stars arrive. John arrives with his team, probably full of pride and nervousness. The film is his triumph after decades of dedication. He's seated strategically, but still within reach, perhaps in row 10 or so, close to the action. Even during the moderation before the show, the first tics become noticeable. Boring here, occurs there, the audience shifts restlessly back and forth. But Alan Cumming, the host, speaks up early and says something like, "Tourette syndrome is a disability, the tics are involuntary, thank you for your understanding, we want to create a respectful space." This calms the mood for a moment, but the microphones keep picking up something. Then the presentation begins. The lights are dimmed, Jordan and Lindo enter the stage to thunderous applause, and the teleprompter is ready. Jordan begins the introduction. As smooth as silk, Lindo starts with his deep voice, and in the middle of the sentence, loud as a gunshot, the N-word erupts from the audience. Horrified looks sweep through the hall, faces turn around, some black creatives in the audience visibly flinch. Hannah Beachler from the Sinners team later posted that she heard it 3 times that evening, once directed at her and another time at a black woman nearby. Jordan and Lindo do not break down, finish their performance, announce the winner, but the damage is done. The smell of betrayal hung in the air, money and good PR collided with real human pain. Cumming returned twice and reaffirmed his statement. "The tics you have heard about are involuntary. The person has no control over them. We apologize if you feel offended." If you feel offended, this conditional phrase hit the audience like a blow and worsened the situation, according to Beachler and everyone else who was still sane. The BBC broadcast continued with a 2-hour delay, but kept everything in and only cut out the harmless parts. By the time the show ended, the internet had already exploded. Clips went viral, slow-motion shots of the hosts' faces were shown alongside previous apologies for less controversial matters. And John? He said left the hall in the meantime, but the show continued. Insiders swear that there were frantic calls in the control room and the producers were discussing. Should we cut it? It's a disability that could come across as discriminatory. In a text message I received, it said, "Leave it in, Cumming brought it up. A cut risks backlash from the Tourette community." The motive is clear. They want to maintain the narrative that BAFTA is the pioneer of inclusion after I Swear was awarded. Even if it means that 2 black icons are disparaged during their presence without a single personal apology that evening. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because to understand why this runs so deep, we need to talk about the hypocrisy that has been eroding this industry for years. the same Hollywood and British film industry that was occupied in 2020 and 2021 with Black Lives Matter panels, diversity quotas, suddenly falls silent when the insult is real, audible, and defended under the guise of disability. Black people are simply supposed to accept it with dignity, smile, and move on, because anyone who questions it becomes the villain who kicks someone who is suffering for life. But let's be honest, the industry loves victim stories when it wins awards. I Swear is praised, John's activism is in the spotlight, but what about the human cost for Jordan and Lindo? Silence. No immediate contact, no personal call from BAFTA leadership, nothing. Delroy Lindo later told Vanity Fair that he wished someone had reached out just to check if everything was okay. Nothing. This is the dagger in the back, the silent knife that says, your pain doesn't matter to us, our PR success counts. John's journey did not end with the diagnosis. After 1996, he became professionally involved with those affected, giving lectures that reached thousands, and helped change how schools and businesses deal with Tourette syndrome. He met with families in crisis situations and told his story candidly, the bullying, the isolation, the way strangers yelled at him because of his tics, village, ID village, because they thought he was drunk or crazy. The 1989 documentary made him famous, but it also labeled him as John is not crazy on village, eat village, a stigma that accompanied him throughout his life. Follow-up examinations showed that he was still struggling but did not give up. Village, eat village. When the filming of I Swear began, he was on set as a consultant, ensuring that the tics did not appear caricatured, and the humor was based on truth and not on mockery. Aramayo spent weeks with him, getting to know the triggers, village, eat village, the exhaustion after a day with many tics, and how coprolalia can lead to picking up derogatory expressions from everyday language, village, ID village, not because one believes them, but because the brain shuts down and selects the most taboo words it knows. Village, ID village. Production staff assured that therapists were on hand, but no one thought to apply the same care to the seating arrangement or the microphones at the BAFTA Awards. Village, ID village. He invited him as a hero, promoted the film in the highest terms, and then acted shocked when the disease that had been celebrated took effect. Village, eat village. And as for the money, in this city, only money counts. The $8.2 million box office of I Swear was boosted by the BAFTA nominations, and awards massively increased. Streaming deals probably added several million more. To protect this investment, Village, ID Village, the authentic Tourette story, had to be obscured at all costs. John's MBE, his decades-long commitment to Family's Village, ID Village, that is undeniably legitimate and has saved lives, including his own after the tough times. But when one is in the global spotlight through this platform, Village, Eat Village, and the tics affect black stars, the defense reaches its limits if the organizers have not planned better. Village, ID Village. Medical experts explain in all their reports that coprolalia is not intentionally induced, but rather a disorder of brain structure. Village, ID Village. The severity varies, and public events can be controlled through preparations such as directional microphones or supervisors. Village, ID Village. The BAFTA ignored all of that and relied on the fact that the apology would fix everything. They were wrong, and the silence afterwards proves it. Village, eat village. The storm on social media broke out that very night. Clips reached millions of views by the morning of the 23rd. Village, ID Village. Hashtags linked the topic of Tourette with the fight for racial justice and forced everyone to take a stand to avoid being targeted by criticism. Village, ID Village. Disabled activists vehemently countered, do not punish a man who cannot control his illness. He has already suffered enough. Village, eat village. Black voices, on the other hand, countered with the obvious. The impacts matter, the lack of mitigation weighs even heavier. Village, ID village. And in the midst of all this, the BBC published its apology hours later, focusing on the editing error rather than the actual issue. Village, ID village. Some viewers may have heard vulgar and offensive expressions. These arose from involuntary verbal tics associated with Tourette syndrome. And were, as explained during the ceremony, not intended. We apologize for this not being cut out before the broadcast. Village, ID village. and it will now be removed from the version on BBC iPlayer. An apology for the technical error, not for the fact that Jordan and Lindo were affected, village, not for Cummings' conditional if offended. The BAFTA itself remained silent for days, presumably consulting in crisis meetings with lawyers, and wondered how she could walk the fine line without losing her progressive credibility. This raises the question that no one in the industry wants to say out loud. Village-eyed village. Can we advocate for inclusion without neglecting respect for other ethnicities when both collide? The response from BAFTA and BBC so far is a weak, euphemistic maybe. Village, eat village. They are known for selective political correctness. They stage marginalized stories for the shine of award season, but ignore the human costs when it gets tricky. Village, eat village? One can only think of all the times they praised themselves for diversity while ignoring power imbalances at their own events. Here the biopic wins, John is celebrated as a hero, village, eat village, but the black actors, who were the actual targets, are being ignored. It's classic Hollywood math, calculating PR points, village, ID, village. The story of disability currently meets more criteria than the confrontation with a racist insult, especially when the person who utters it is the star of the feel-good story. Village, eat village. Rumors from the after parties and texts from the dressing rooms suggest that there was whispered conversation all night long with some black creatives leaving early. And PR managers would have been asked in crisis discussions, wait it out or comment. In an alleged group chat of an agency, executives debated about village, eat village, whether they should support Tourette or risk a discriminatory label, but our customers are angry, and the personal consequences for everyone involved, village, eat village. John's childhood in Galashiels, the rainy schoolyards where children mimicked his tics to bully him, the family dinners where his mother quietly cried after another bad day, village, eat village. The filming in 1989, during which the cameras captured him during his breakdown because the stairs wouldn't stop. His years as an activist, the public speeches, village, eat village, in which he got a tick in the middle of a sentence but continued speaking, the moment of receiving the MBE, which felt like a confirmation after decades as a crazy boy, village, eat village. The film, I swear, was his triumph, but that night changed everything. For Jordan, the boy from Newark who worked his way up from a modeling job to a global star, village, ID village. Was this another reminder that no success erases the tightrope walk between races? Lindo, the Jamaican immigrant who left England because the film industry had no place for him, village, eat village. Is it returning here now? The irony is painful. Your silence in public is clever marketing, but secretly the frustration is real. Village, ID village. However, we only touched on the topic superficially, as the true betrayal runs much deeper than a single night. When we look at the men on stage and see how the system has completely let them down, the hypocrisy continues to crumble. The way the industry defends one form of otherness while expecting the other to simply take the hit, that is the dirty secret she is desperately trying to hide. But we will come back to that because this story is far from over. The backroom decisions, the ignored warnings, the selective excuses, all of this is interconnected in a way it claims that reveals the rotten core of this global entertainment business. Stay tuned, because the reactions from Jamie Foxx, Wendell Pierce, and the others were the point where the truth comes to light. And I tell you, when the criticism really started, as soon as the credits of the BAFTA Awards rolled, it claimed, was it Jamie Foxx who didn't waste a second and call things by their name declared? Unfiltered, without any chatter, just the brutal truth that hit like a hammer blow. The man who survived his personal hell, this frightening illness in 2023, when the whole world prayed for him, declared. The Oscar winner who came from the public housing in Terrell, Texas, claimed was raised by a single mother who worked hard to support herself and his siblings, claimed who made a name for himself in stand-up comedy clubs and sketches in Living Color, and in 2004 achieved breakthrough success with Ray and became the first black actor to win the Oscar for Best Actor for a musical biography. Claimed he poured all his pain and triumph into this performance, which moved critics and audiences to tears. Fox knows the industry inside and out, knows how it tears people apart, how selectively outrage is expressed, and how some stories are protected while others are suppressed. So when a post about the incident went viral on Instagram, right under the clip, it claimed, "In the Jordan and Lindo for a split second on stage, as if frozen, Fox 6 was the first to type unacceptable, short and to the point." In a later story, he added, "No, he meant it seriously." Of all the words that would have come to him, it had to be this one, perfectly timed. While the two black stars were presenting, let's be honest, we all know that this kind of skepticism feels different when you've been in that situation yourself. Fox's comment went viral, thousands of likes in minutes. He was quoted everywhere because he voiced what many thought, but did not dare to say aloud. The involuntary defense seemed unbelievable, claimed, when the statement was so clear, so distinct, and so targeted at that moment. And he was not alone, because Wendell Pierce, the absolute legend from The Wire, declared, the man who brought Bunk Moreland to life with his deep voice and even deeper moral compass, claimed, the actor from New Orleans who got back on his feet after Katrina, claimed, the Broadway veteran who has consistently delivered outstanding performances in series like Suits and Jack Ryan for decades, claims, spoke up and raised a sensitive issue. Pierce wrote, "It is outrageous that the first reaction was not an unconditional and sincere apology to Delroy Lindo and Michael B. Jordan. The insult towards them takes priority. The reasons for the racist insult are irrelevant." He presented point by point without beating around the bush and spoke about how the industry always expects black talent to show greatness, endure the criticism for the supposed well-being of others, and how the commitment to the rights of people with disabilities cannot be used as an excuse declare when the effects affect skin color. Pierce has always advocated for representation, quietly but insistently, declaring, and his words carried weight because they were not a speech of anger, but a logical deconstruction of hypocrisy, claimed, that directed the conversation to where it hurt the most. The human cost for Lindo and Jordan, claimed, who have fought like champions but deserve better than silence. Then there was Hannah Beachler, the Oscar-winning production designer of Black Panther, who declared, the woman who created the worlds for Ryan Coogler's Sinners together with Jordan. She was in the hall that evening, and their social media posts further heated up the atmosphere. Beachler said she heard the N-word 3 times, once directed at herself, another time at another black woman nearby. Although she called for leniency and understanding in light of the almost unbearable situation, she declared she sharply criticized what she considered the half-hearted apology from host Alan Cumming at the end of the event. This phrase, "we apologize if you feel offended," she said it only made the situation worse. This conditional nonsense makes the victims those who may be overly sensitive. Beachler wrote, "I know we have to handle this with dignity and move on." However, the situation was worsened by the casual apology. If you felt offended at the end of the broadcast, of course we were offended, but our vibration, our spiritual energy is higher than what happened. I am not made of steel, it did not bounce off me, but I rise above it. It can't harm me. What defines me as an artist? Impressive words from someone who knows the hard everyday life, the hurdles for black women behind the scenes, declares the way the industry celebrates diversity on screen but fails in real life. These reactions did not come out of nowhere, they were the eruption after hours of the industry trying to maintain composure. To understand why they hit so hard, we need to take a closer look at the biographies of the men who stood on this stage and were completely taken by surprise. Their life paths make the lack of support from BAFTA and BBC seem like a downright betrayal. Michael B. Jordan, born on February 9, 1987 in Newark, New Jersey, grew up in a household characterized by ambition. His mother, Donna, worked part-time as a teacher, and his father, Michael Sr., was also employed. The family circumstances drove him to invest all his energy into taking action. At the age of 11, he began modeling, landed catalog jobs, and as a teenager, acted in soap operas like All My Children. He had to deal with early stereotyping and the pressure of being considered the next big black leading man. He achieved breakthrough success in 2013 with Fruitvale Station, in which he portrayed Oscar Grant in this shocking true story that caused a stir at the Sundance Film Festival. Jordan infused his role with raw emotions from real suffering. Then came Creed 2015, where he transformed his body, trained 6 hours a day, and turned the Rocky spin-off into a franchise with hundreds of millions in box office results, proof that he could be a leading man. Black Panther 2018 made him world famous. Killmonger stole the show with his intensity and charisma, but behind the glamour were the legal disputes with his manager over money, the ups and downs of his public relationships, and the struggle to establish the outlier society to gain control over his own stories. In 2026, he filmed the dark, stylish vampire thriller Sinners with Coogler, in which he played twins or another twisted dual role. The BAFTA Awards were supposed to be a brief, elegant gesture in the award circuit, not this. A man who has always advocated for outstanding achievements and representation of black people is insulted with the N-word in the middle of the presentation. Even if it happened involuntarily, it feels different. And the fact that no one from BAFTA reached out to him either that evening or the next morning, Lindo put it best in his interview with Vanity Fair. They would have fulfilled their duty on stage, thoroughly professional, but he wished someone had simply talked to them, briefly inquired about how they were doing, acknowledged that two black men had experienced something like this. Delroy Lindo, the Grand Seigneur, born on November 18, 1952 in Lewisham, southeast London, as the son of Jamaican immigrants, spent his childhood and youth in constant motion. First 12 years in the UK, then in Canada, and finally in Northern California. He completed training at the American Conservatory Theatre and perfected his impressive stage presence there. This was followed by films such as Malcolm X with Spike Lee in 1992, in which he embodied the West Indian Archie with such authority that his portrayal achieved cult status, as well as Get Shorty, God's Work, and Devil's Contribution, and Romeo Must Die. Overall, he looks back on a career of over 40 years full of quiet strength, far from the hustle and bustle of tabloid press. In an interview with The Guardian, he spoke plainly. Everything he has achieved is thanks to his emigration, as the British film industry at that time had no place for a black actor like him. His return to the BAFTA should have been a proud moment. Lindo's sovereignty on stage, this brief pause after the proclamation, but his energetic continuation shows what a professional he is, but his quote in Vanity Fair reveals this thing, the desire for BAFTA to have reached out after basic human decency. Now we want to reconstruct that night even more precisely, because the devil is in the details, which clearly shows how it could come to that. The Royal Festival Hall on the south bank of the Thames, this icon of glass and steel, shines in the glow of the London night sky. Outside the red carpet, flashes of light flicker. Inside a hall filled to capacity with thousands of spectators, luxurious seats, huge screens, sparkling chandeliers, the scent of fresh orchids in the air, vintage champagne. John Davidson arrives as a guest in connection with I Swear, the biographical film that has just won several awards. His team is around him, pride is in the air, but early on the first tics become apparent. During Sarah Putt's opening speech, he shouts, "Boring!" The microphones pick up everything, since the rows of seats are so close together. Alan Cumming, the host, is the first to speak. Tourette syndrome is a disability. The tics are involuntary. Thank you for your understanding. We want to create a respectful space. This brings some calm, but then the presentation of the best visual effects begins. The lights are dimmed, a spotlight turns on, Jordan and Lindo take the stage, thunderous applause erupts, the teleprompter runs. Jordan begins the introduction, Lindo names the nominees, and then, in the middle of a sentence loud enough to echo throughout the entire hall, the N-word bursts forth from Davidson's seat. A murmur goes through the crowd, heads turn. Jordan's jaw tenses briefly, Lindo's eyes narrow, but they do not break down. You could practically smell the panic in the room as the crew realized that the worldwide broadcast had just taken place. Cumming later returned with a second speech. The tics you heard this evening are involuntary, meaning the person has no control over their speech. We apologize if you feel offended. This if hit many like a blow, especially Bichler, who was on his way to the after party. And there personally took another hit. Davidson reportedly left the show on his own in the middle, but the show continued. The BBC had time to edit with its 2-hour delay. They cut out other things like political jokes, the Free Palestine moment, or the tirade of a director, but that stayed in for the quasi-live broadcast to millions of viewers. Insiders from the control room and people who wrote anonymous texts swear there were heated debates. Should we cut it? It's about disability. that could be discriminatory in contradiction to the I swear narrative. In an alleged SMS chain, it said, "Stop it, Cumming has already addressed it twice." Cutting it now risks backlash from the Tourette community and jeopardizes the success of the film. The motive was crystal clear. They wanted to tell the story, protect advanced inclusion after the film had already won 3 awards, even if it meant that black artists were disparaged, without an immediate personal apology being made. And here comes the hypocrisy that drives one to fury. The same global entertainment industry that held Black Lives Matter panels for years after 2020 rewrote scripts with sensitivity readers. And everyone who was cancelled for the wrong word in a tweet suddenly turns to involuntary, therefore understanding when the insult is real, and is directed against black moderators. Black people are expected to accept this with dignity and smile for the cameras. Because those who resist become the disability-hating villain who attacks a disabled activist who has done good. But let's be honest, the industry loves to celebrate disability when it brings awards and streaming numbers. I swear benefited from Davidson's MBE, and his activism is being recognized, but the human impact on Jordan and Lindo, secondary. Jemele Hill put it succinctly. Black people and his activism is acknowledged, but the human impact on Jordan and Lindo, secondary. Jemele Hill put it succinctly. Black people, that is the problem. Selective alliances where one marginalized group enjoys full protection while another has to bear the consequences for the image. Davidson's own story adds further dimensions to the whole. Born in Galashiels, that small town in the Scottish borders, known for its wind and its rumors. The symptoms appeared early. In the 1980s, when no one understood his illness, he was treated like a troublemaker at school. He was bullied on schoolyards that smelled of rain and chalk dust, and his family struggled with the situation. The BBC documentary John's Not Mad from 1989 made him the face of the illness. Sequels in 2002 and 2009 showcased his development to the activist. He spoke at schools, trained police officers, and received the MBE from the Queen in 2019, despite his tics and his stubbornness. The film I Swear, sensitively directed by Robert Aramayo, who studied the tics in depth and whose title alludes to swearing, had a spectacular premiere. Critics praised it as cathartic. It performed well at the box office and received BAFTA nominations, which ultimately led to awards. The production was aware of the unpredictability, yet BAFTA positioned it so that the microphones captured everything. For a PR campaign that presented an authentic depiction should be ensured. According to reports from The Hollywood Reporter, there were warnings before the show and discussions about how to handle it, but the drive for inclusion prevailed. The first statement from the BBC, which appeared hours later, focused on the editing error. Some viewers may have during the BAFTA Film Awards 2026. Harsh and offensive expressions were heard. These arose from involuntary verbal tics associated with Tourette syndrome and were not intentional. We apologize that this was not cut out before the broadcast. Later, the BBC added that the producers had not heard anything as they were in the transmission track. A second apology, but still no direct personal contact with the moderators. BAFTA referred everything to the BBC and remained largely silent, presumably in consultations with lawyers to find the right balance. Lindo's request for public relations remained unanswered until February 23. The story continued to make waves with opinion pieces in The Guardian, Vanity Fair, and Deadline that analyzed the phrasing of the medical reality. Of coprolalia, where tics can adopt taboo words from the environment, is not chosen but learned, and the severity of the symptoms can be managed through planning. The consequences are currently a cultural battle in full swing. Clips are circulating with millions of views. Disability activists are defending disability. And black voices and allies like Pierce, Fox, Beechler, and Hill highlight the impact and the inadequate handling of the issue. The team of I Swear was involved through Beechler and Jordan. The success of the film may have been affected by the debate, but also strengthened. I Swear benefited from the controversy and generated additional streaming numbers, which increased the value of the awards by millions. Borderline cases are being discussed. If it had been a different insult or different goals, could the delay have been used differently? How are other invisible disabilities taken into account at award ceremonies compared to this specific case? What impact does this have on future events? Will they be better organized, include appropriate hints in invitations, or will they avoid certain guests to prevent the scandal? Additionally, there is the consideration of how Hollywood has addressed racist insensitivity, the pattern of weighing which narrative better protects the brand, rumors from the Warner Bros. After party, whispers about secret phone calls, some black creatives leaving early, PR consultants who advised their clients to remain silent to avoid discriminatory labels while they were seething inside. In a supposedly leaked internal memo regarding BAFTA preparations, it was stated that guests with Tourette syndrome should be considered in accordance with the inclusion policy. But nothing about the protection of moderators or additional microphones. This is not a coincidence but a deliberate prioritization. The story about disability addressed more current issues than the confrontation with racist discomfort, the human cost for families. Jordan's mother, Donna, probably sent supportive texts from the USA, while Lindo's relatives in the UK had to witness. How the return turned into a disaster, Davidson's environment reacted defensively after years of successful work for the rights of minorities. The entire industry has been exposed as transaction-oriented, quick to present itself as morally superior but slow when it comes to the shiny story. This is the chaos we are still in as I record this on the 23rd. Statements are only trickling through. The social media is flooded, the edited iPlayer version is online, but the damage is done. Fox, Pierce, and Bichler are sharpening their knives against each other because they have forced the debate that those in power hate, the debate about balanced respect when identities clash. Can we celebrate one struggle without diminishing the other? The previous response from the machinery has been half-hearted apologies and subsequent corrections. But the real institutional silence, the backroom calculations at BAFTA itself, which allowed the whole thing to pass without a direct apology to the moderators, that is the deeper betrayal that we will investigate next. For the cover-up and the reasons for the delayed contact reveal even more dirt about who really counts in this city when the cameras are off and the checks are cashed. Stay tuned, because the story of who knew what when, the ignored briefings, the profit over people calculations, it's going to get much worse. Yes, and it will get much uglier when we start naming those who held the strings and still remained silent for hours. After Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo left the stage, the weight of the event hung like a failed sequel that no one wanted to see. Sarah Put, the outgoing BAFTA chair, who ended her term in 2026 after leading the Academy through some of the most challenging phases of the diversity debate, was significantly involved in the decisions regarding the guest list that brought John Davidson to the forefront as the living embodiment of the message of I swear. Sources that participated in the internal planning meetings at the Piccadilly headquarters in the previous months and that are still being whispered about, reporting to me that Sarah Pott was the driving force behind the argument of the breakthrough inclusion moment. She argued that Davidson's presence would send the strongest signal that the BAFTA takes the film's stories about disability seriously after the numerous nominations and later awards. An internal memo that was sent to me in January 2026, she writes her handwritten note in the margin next to a seating plan. Davidson in the main hall close to the stage for authenticity. This is our chance to take a leading role in matters of representation. Pioneering role? Easy to say when you're not personally facing the criticism of the global backlash that erupted even before the end of the after parties. Kurt Jones, the director who put everything on the line for I Swear and literally sold his house to maintain financing during production delays, involved in all important discussions regarding the organization of the awards ceremony. The film was the absolute BAFTA star of the evening and won several trophies, including the surprising award for Best Actor for Robert Aramayo. After months of filming with the real John Davidson as a consultant, in those where he observed his takes live during rehearsals and takes, Kirk Jones knew the unpredictability of the film better than anyone else. But according to insiders, he gave the green light for the plan to treat Davidson as an honored guest without requesting additional security measures such as special soundproofing. The story is the ticks, we cannot sugarcoat that. Kirk Jones is said to have told the team in a Zoom conference. This philosophy was also maintained where the microphones were turned on and the seats were fixed for optimal visibility. Robert Aramayo, the rising star who narrowly beat Timothée Chalamet, and with an inspiring thank you speech, referred to Timothée Davidson as the most remarkable man he had ever met, dedicating the victory to all families who are still struggling for understanding, celebrated his breakthrough backstage while there was hectic activity in the control room. However, to this day, Aramayo has not spoken out, but to this day, Aramayo has not publicly commented on the consequences, no Instagram post, no statement, nothing that could tarnish the shine of his big night, or could tarnish the streaming boom of the film. Let's be honest, when the first major role is associated with an illness that has just made headlines worldwide, for a young actor, it is indeed smartest to let the PR people keep quiet while the prize money flows. Rumors from the Warner Bros. After party, whispers about secret phone calls, some black creatives leaving early, PR consultants who advised their clients to remain silent to avoid discriminatory labels while they were seething inside. In a supposedly leaked internal memo regarding BAFTA preparations, it was stated that guests with Tourette syndrome should be considered in accordance with the inclusion policy. But nothing about the protection of moderators or additional microphones. This is not a coincidence but a deliberate prioritization. The story about disability addressed more current issues than the confrontation with racist discomfort, the human cost for families. Jordan's mother, Donna, probably sent supportive texts from the USA, while Lindo's relatives in the UK had to witness. How the return turned into a disaster, Davidson's environment reacted defensively after years of successful work for the rights of minorities. The entire industry has been exposed as transaction-oriented, quick to present itself as morally superior but slow when it comes to the shiny story. This is the chaos we are still in as I record this on the 23rd. Statements are only trickling through. The social media is flooded, the edited iPlayer version is online, but the damage is done. Fox, Pierce, and Bichler are sharpening their knives against each other because they have forced the debate that those in power hate, the debate about balanced respect when identities clash. Can we celebrate one struggle without diminishing the other? The previous response from the machinery has been half-hearted apologies and subsequent corrections. But the real institutional silence, the backroom calculations at BAFTA itself, which allowed the whole thing to pass without a direct apology to the moderators, that is the deeper betrayal that we will investigate next. For the cover-up and the reasons for the delayed contact reveal even more dirt about who really counts in this city when the cameras are off and the checks are cashed. Stay tuned, because the story of who knew what when, the ignored briefings, the profit over people calculations, it's going to get much worse. Yes, and it will get much uglier when we start naming those who held the strings and still remained silent for hours. After Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo left the stage, the weight of the event hung like a failed sequel that no one wanted to see. Sarah Puth, the outgoing BAFTA chair, who ended her term in 2026 after leading the Academy through some of the most challenging phases of the diversity debate, was significantly involved in the decisions regarding the guest list that brought John Davidson to the forefront as the living embodiment of the message of "I swear." Sources that participated in the internal planning meetings at the Piccadilly headquarters in the previous months, and that are still being whispered about, reporting to me that Sarah Puth was the driving force behind the argument of the breakthrough inclusion moment. She argued that Davidson's presence would send the strongest signal that the BAFTA takes the film's stories about disability seriously after the numerous nominations and later awards. An internal memo that was sent to me in January 2026, she writes her handwritten note in the margin next to a seating plan. Davidson in the main hall close to the stage for authenticity. This is our chance to take a leading role in matters of representation. Pioneering role? Easy to say when you're not personally facing the criticism of the global backlash that erupted even before the end of the after parties. Kurt Jones, the director who put everything on the line for I Swear and literally sold his house to maintain financing during production delays, involved in all important discussions regarding the organization of the awards ceremony. The film was the absolute BAFTA star of the evening and won several trophies, including the surprising award for Best Actor for Robert Aramayo. After months of filming with the real John Davidson as a consultant, in those where he observed his takes live during rehearsals and takes, Kirk Jones knew the unpredictability of the film better than anyone else. But according to insiders, he gave the green light for the plan to treat Davidson as an honored guest without requesting additional security measures such as special soundproofing. The story is the ticks, we cannot sugarcoat that. Kirk Jones is said to have told the team in a Zoom conference. This philosophy was also maintained where the microphones were turned on and the seats were fixed for optimal visibility. Robert Aramayo, the rising star who narrowly beat Timothée Chalamet, and with an inspiring thank you speech, referred to Timothée Davidson as the most remarkable man he had ever met, dedicating the victory to all families who are still struggling for understanding, celebrated his breakthrough backstage while there was hectic activity in the control room. However, to this day, Aramayo has not spoken out, but to this day, Aramayo has not publicly commented on the consequences, no Instagram post, no statement, nothing that could tarnish the shine of his big night, or could tarnish the streaming boom of the film. Let's be honest, when the first major role is associated with an illness that has just made headlines worldwide, for a young actor, it is indeed smartest to let the PR people keep quiet while the prize money flows. The hypocrisy in the city runs deeper than any red carpet, and the way the BAFTA has handled this matter has exposed the selective application of its rules depending on whose story is currently winning awards. The same academy that previously made every effort to personally apologize for racist incidents, revise protocols, and involve consultants suddenly reacts when the disruption is related to an issue of inclusion of people with disabilities in connection with its own award-winning film. The reaction is then packaged in sluggish conditional formulations that shift the responsibility onto those affected. Robert Aramayo's victory over Timothée Chalamet as Best Actor was not only a career leap for the young British actor, but it also established I Swear as the defining story on the topic of disability for the season. As a result, any sharp criticism of the approach seemed like an attack on the message itself that the statuette was meant to represent. Kirk Jones remained silent in the days that followed and focused in interviews on the core message of the film and the collaboration with Davidson. Sources from the press circus, however, assured that his team tried to limit the damage and advised all parties involved to present the incident as complex and educational rather than addressing the specific pain of the moderators who had nothing to do with the film. Meanwhile, work on Ryan Coogler's vampire film The Sinners, which was already in the midst of post-production, was affected by the connection with Hannah Beachler and Michael B. Jordan. It was said that the advertising measures had been adjusted and additional awareness discussions had taken place, as no one wanted to see the clip with the N-word under every trailer. Let's talk about the emerging boycott rumors that were voiced by Black British filmmakers and creatives who were present that evening and immediately felt the changed atmosphere when the word was mentioned. Groups like the Black Film and TV Network circulated internal memos demanding a halt to BAFTA submissions until concrete changes were made to guest protocols and apology standards. Sarah Puth was specifically named as someone who could have called for better planning given her public commitment to equality. Such a memo, which was forwarded to me by a producer who attended the debriefings, lists specific demands, mandatory impact assessments for every guest with non-vocal tics, separate audio feeds for the host, and a strict policy for immediate private contact with anyone affected by an outbreak, regardless of the cause. The fact that none of this existed beforehand, despite organizational notes being given prior to the show warning attendees about possible involuntary noises from John Davidson, shows the extent of institutional blindness. Attendees were asked to be mindful, but the moderators left in the dark until it was too late and then abandoned when the lights came on. The international press also divided as expected. American media outlets like Variety and Deadline highlighted the aspect of racism and the lack of personal responsibility from the BAFTA, comparing Lindo's comments in Vanity Fair with the BBC's apology for the editing. Some British tabloid newspapers, on the other hand, defended the Tourette community and portrayed the criticism as an attack on a lifelong activist who had never sought this kind of attention. Robert Aramayo's award for Best Actor was overshadowed by the controversy in some reports, turning his triumph into a defensive press round where every interviewer wanted to ask the question, "What do you think of the incident?" instead of acknowledging his performance that earned him the award. Kirk Jones gave an early interview in which he expressed his regret over the inconvenience caused, but quickly praised Davidson's courage, a delicate balancing act that secures funding but does not bridge the gap with the hosts who handled their moment absolutely professionally. And now the legal aspects come into play. Lawyers from equality organizations are already examining whether BAFTA and the BBC have fulfilled their public duty of care under the Equality Act. After all, they were aware from the film's production notes about the tics and still chose seating and microphone positions that allowed for maximum attention without considering the overlapping identities. A prominent civil rights attorney with whom I spoke on the condition of anonymity said that the wording of the conditional apology could even reinforce the suspicion of indirect discrimination, as it implies that the action is optional rather than that its effects are real and measurable. The BAFTA's shifting of responsibility onto the BBC is a classic example of corporate accountability. Sarah Putz's team can claim to have merely been the hosts, while the broadcaster bears the criticism of the editing. However, everyone in the industry knows that the award ceremony sets the tone and determines the guest list. The removal of the entire ceremony from the BBC iPlayer just a few hours after intense criticism peaked was damage control in its most obvious form. An admission of error without ever addressing why the 2-hour delay, which was specifically intended for moments like this, was not used to protect the integrity of the broadcast and the dignity of the artists on stage. This whole affair exposes the power dynamics that have always driven this global entertainment industry. Stories with current cultural interests enjoy full protection, even if this means pushing exactly those people to the sidelines. The industry allegedly promotes as soon as the cameras are rolling. Sarah Putz's silence in the first 24 hours, followed by the minimal common statements, had nothing to do with her not knowing what to say, but rather that she calculated which excuse would cause the least loss of goodwill with the disability associations that I swear had contributed to his successes. Kirk Jones and Robert Aramayo, who were inseparably connected to the film, became untouchable in the public debate, as criticism of the approach to their project carried the risk of being portrayed as anti-progress. Thus, Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo remained as role models for decency, while the machinery moved towards the next trophy season. The leaked production manual for the ceremony, of which I possess several pages, contains a whole section on considering different needs, with bullet points for Davidson, but no mention of protective measures for the moderators or viewers that could be triggered by the language that might provoke the tics. This omission is not a coincidence, but rather reflects the priority list of whose well-being takes precedence when two marginalized groups confront each other live on television. The effects are already clearly noticeable in the 2026 awards calendar. Other awards have quietly included clauses in their invitation protocols. And the BAFTA incident was mentioned as a cautionary example that no one wants to repeat. The team of I Swear is adjusting the press tour and integrates additional themes such as solidarity and dealing with unexpected situations, as the connection through Jordan and Beechler means that the clip is included with every interview. Ryan Coogler himself, the visionary behind the project, remains reserved as usual, but insiders report that he is advocating for better industry-wide standards in conference calls, so that no other black talent suffers from the consequences of another's illness. The financial success of I Swear continues. Streaming contracts have reportedly been negotiated upwards by 15 to 20% in some countries solely due to the ongoing discussions, through which Kirk Jones's personal financial risk becomes an unexpected windfall, while the human costs in the reporting are only mentioned in passing. New voices are emerging hourly. Black British directors and screenwriters are organizing virtual meetings to discuss common reactions. Some are calling for a temporary moratorium on BAFTA participation until Sarah Putz's successor commits to concrete reforms. An organizer explained that it is not about punishment, but about prevention. They want to ensure that no future guest of honor turns an award ceremony into a platform for harm. Robert Aramayo's team responds to inquiries about whether he will comment on this in future appearances, but the strategy remains silence to maintain the shine of the best actor. Kirk Jones gave additional interviews in which he emphasized the collaborative spirit of the film. However, when asked about the BAFTA action, he referred to the Academy, the same Academy that had bet on the success of his film and is now reaping the rewards while avoiding the uncomfortable questions. The morning after, there must have been a dense, panicked atmosphere in the offices at Piccadilly Circus. The coffee had gone cold while Sarah Putz's team kept drafting statements that never achieved the necessary effect. The decision to have the BBC take the lead in drafting the apology was strategically wise. She took time to assess the mood among the Tourette self-help groups that were already mobilizing to defend Davidson as a hero, whose illness should not be instrumentalized against him. However, this defense does not change the institutional failure to account for the real consequences of the incident. This was particularly tragic because the moderators were two of the most respected black voices in the industry, men who had established themselves professionally in fields that had not been created for them. That Delroy Lindo had to publicly express his desire for basic clarification in Vanity Fair speaks volumes about how low the bar had fallen. A simple human gesture became a headline because it never happened. This is not an isolated case, but a pattern that has already shaped far too many award seasons. The dazzling production triumphs over the unvarnished reality. The BAFTA Awards 2026 have now ruthlessly exposed this pattern: greed for profit, lobbying pressure, the fear of being labeled a false ally. All of this contributed to the deafening silence and the concealment of responsibility. However, resistance from the entire industry is growing, and when you look at history, the next award ceremony will closely observe this and adjust its own protocols, because no one wants to be the next Sarah Pat that must explain why the security measures failed during the critical phase. The machinery continues to operate, the checks are being cashed, but the trust, it fades faster than even an edited version can be saved in the media player. The victims are those who actually wanted to do their job and now had to be reminded that in this industry, some stories are still handled with kid gloves, while others are expected to silently grit their teeth. The first cracks in the supposed unity are already becoming apparent. Some BAFTA board members are unofficially distancing themselves from the approach and accuse the production committee of not having assessed the risks more thoroughly when determining the guest list. Kirk Jones's production company is negotiating with distributors about to use the controversy as a learning moment for the next marketing campaign of the film and to turn the pain into a platform. However, this strategy only works if the original recipients of the Outburst remain silent, and Lindo's statement suggests that patience is running out. Robert Aramayo, fresh off his victory as Best Actor, faces the delicate task of to celebrate his success without alienating either side. His team's decision to stay out of the dispute so far is indeed the safe way, but leaves a vacuum that critics like to fill with questions about complicity through silence. The far-reaching consequences for the global entertainment industry in 2026 are enormous, as all major award institutions, from the Oscars to the Golden Globes, are currently reviewing their guest policies and procedures regarding broadcast delays. They use the example of the BAFTA to show how not to handle situations when medical necessities clash with cultural sensitivities. Sarah Putz's last year as chair was supposed to be a triumph for the progress in diversity that she has so decisively advanced, but instead it ends with a controversy that will shape her legacy unless swift and meaningful reforms follow. So far, the signals are at best contradictory. The BBC's quick reaction to remove the ceremony from the iPlayer media library was merely a stopgap, but it also acknowledged that the original decision to broadcast it was unjustifiable. This raises the question of why there was a delay at all, if not to hide exactly such moments unfiltered from households. In London and Los Angeles, edge cases are currently being discussed in every backstage area and Zoom conference. What would have happened if the tics had affected a different group, or if the hosts had visibly reacted on stage instead of maintaining professionalism and composure? Would the reaction have been faster, more intense, more personal? The related question of how other invisible impairments are handled at such events, from anxiety disorders to chronic pain to neurodiversity, reveals the inconsistent approach. Some receive comprehensive preliminary planning, while others only get organizational hints and hope for the best. The conclusion is obvious. When the impairment is associated with an award-winning story, planning is neglected in favor of external impact. And it is exactly this dark secret that the industry is desperately trying to cover up before the next red carpet is rolled out. With each new leak, more facets of the betrayal come to light, such as the text message conversation of a BAFTA emerging producer to his boss right after the presentation. A screenshot shows the text, "Is everything okay with the moderators? No contact has been made according to the legal department. We are waiting for a statement." This waiting for a statement mentality turned an avoidable situation into a full-blown scandal. Jordan and Lindo had to process the insult in silence while the PR machinery calculated the numbers. The connection to I Swear brings another twist. Ryan Coogler's team is reportedly advising extreme caution at all future award ceremonies, as the connection through Jordan means that the clip will be instrumentalized in the comment sections for months. Financial analysts are already predicting a positive effect on the value of I Swear. Some estimates suggest that the combination of the award ceremony and controversy will generate additional revenue of 20-30 million in the long term. Silence is therefore not only a conscious decision but also a profitable one for those involved. The human costs are repeatedly overlooked in these numbers, the quiet frustration in the conversations after the celebrations as Black creatives discuss the lack of follow-up, the changed atmosphere in spaces that were supposed to celebrate excellence. Sarah Puth's office is in lockdown mode. Speakers keep repeating the same phrases about supporting all communities, but without the concrete personal acknowledgement demanded by Lindo, it sounds hollow to those affected. Kirk Jones and Robert Aramayo remain the privileged group in this narrative, as the success of their film protects them from uncomfortable questions, while the moderators, who had no connection to the story, must bear the emotional burden of exemplifying understanding for an industry that has not modeled it for them. This kind of institutional decay thrives in the gap between good intentions and actual responsibility, where the fear of a certain form of backlash outweighs the reality of another, and the calculations always favor the story that looks best on the trophy shelf. The BAFTA Awards 2026 were meant to be a celebration of the progress of cinema, but they became a prime example of how progress still leaves some voices unheard. The backlash is not subsiding, it is evolving, and every day more prominent figures are speaking out, demanding a systemic change that goes beyond apologies and includes preventive measures. Whether the BAFTA listens or continues its distraction tactics will not only determine Sarah Puth's departure, but also the credibility of the entire award system for years to come. And at the moment, experts are closely watching whether the next statement truly carries weight or is just empty words to continue cashing checks while the dirt is swept under the next red carpet. And speaking of this next statement, when she finally crawled out on the afternoon of February 23 like a guilty dog with its tail between its legs, it was the kind of corporate word salad that made every PR manager in London and Los Angeles shudder in their group chats, because instead of naming names and admitting the mistake, BAFTA and the BBC jointly released this paragraph that danced around everything without landing a single hit. The statement signed by designated chair Amanda Berry and BBC Director General Tim Davie vaguely spoke of learning from this complex intersection of experiences and the commitment to improve protocols for all future events. However, there was no direct apology to Michael B. Jordan or Delroy Lindo, nor was there an acknowledgement that the seating arrangement or microphone placement was a disaster waiting to happen, along with a timeline for the actual implementation of these improved protocols. Amanda Berry, who had been developed for years as the successor to Sarah Puth and was part of the selection committee that confirmed Davidson as a guest of honor, personally approved the final schedule, which, according to a youth coordinator who resigned on the same day and sent me the commented PDF with the red annotations, did not include any specific plan for audio isolation for the audience area where he was seated. Next to the line, guest with Tourette syndrome parquet. No special audio treatment required according to inclusion guidelines. Amanda Berry's initials were noted. Tim Davie, the head of the entire BBC empire, who was connected via video link from the broadcasting house in the transmission van that evening, gave his consent to continue the live broadcast during the delay window, as his team had informed him that any cuts could trigger complaints from the charity Tourette's Action and the Disability Rights Commission, two organizations that had been advocating for months with BAFTA for I Swear be more prominently featured in the awards ceremony program. Tim Davis's team at the BBC was already under fire from Ofcom in 2026 due to other broadcasting decisions, including a documentary series about neurodiversity that has been accused of downplaying the real effects. Therefore, he definitely did not want any more trouble with the regulatory authority regarding the Tourette community. For this reason, the joint statement used the phrase complex overlaps so strongly, an elegant way of saying that one does not take sides, even though the parties involved that evening were anything but equal. Amanda Berry, who had just celebrated her success at the British Independent Film Awards and praised I Swear as a beacon for authentic storytelling, has now come under criticism from board members such as producer Kwame Kwei-Armah and director Ama Asante. Both were secretly angry in the internal Slack channels, as they had already warned during the preparation phase of the award ceremony that placing a guest with known loud coprolalia in an unprotected spectator seat during a presentation by black artists would provoke exactly this image: disaster. Kwame Kwei-Armah, the artistic director of The Young Vic, who joined the BAFTA board in 2024 to promote the stories of Black Britons, reportedly wrote in a late-night chat the day before the performance, "We cannot foreground a marginalized experience by risking another period." However, this note was overlooked earlier, as the budget for inclusion had already been spent on marketing the film's disability aspect to the funders. The international reaction to this weak statement was overwhelming, and the division was brutal, depending on which side of the Atlantic you reported from. In the USA, media outlets such as The Hollywood Reporter and the New York Times published digital reports on their front pages with detailed timelines documenting the entire course of the presentation minute by minute until its removal from the BBC iPlayer archive. They interviewed lawyers from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund who described the actions as unprecedented institutional negligence and predicted potential civil lawsuits under the accessibility law if affected individuals were to pursue them. In France, Le Monde published a detailed article that portrayed the incident as a symptom of the selective vigilance of the Anglo-Saxon award culture. It quoted French disability activist Marie-Laure Meyer, president of Tourette France, who stated that the British reaction carries the risk of undermining the acceptance of neurodiversity in Europe by causing people to hesitate in addressing real needs. In Germany, Spiegel focused on the medical aspect and interviewed Professor Dr. Kirsten Müller-Wahl from the Tourette Clinic in Hanover, one of the world's leading researchers in the field of coprolalia. She explained in detail that the condition involves the disinhibition of learned phrases from the linguistic environment, which is not consciously controlled. However, she emphasized that public events with known risk guests require a pre-planned acoustic zoning and security teams, something that BAFTA has obviously neglected despite available resources. Dr. Müller-Wahl stated, "When a tic disorder is invited to the international stage due to its authenticity, the organizers bear the responsibility to protect all other attendees. Otherwise, it is not compassion, but reckless behavior disguised as progress." In Australia, the Sydney Morning Herald published interviews with Indigenous filmmaker Warwick Thornton, who had similar experiences with award ceremonies at the ACTAs and called for better consideration of minority needs. He did not hold back and referred to the BAFTA situation as another example of how white institutions use one minority to evade responsibility towards another. In the UK, The Guardian's coverage was more restrained but no less devastating. Columnist Afua Hirsch wrote that the conditional wording in Alan Cumming's speech and the joint statement perpetuates exactly the hierarchy of suffering that progressive award-giving institutions supposedly want to dismantle. Afua Hirsch interviewed Helen Eddy, managing director of Tourette's Action, who defended Davidson as a pioneer whose commitment has helped thousands. At the same time, she acknowledged no one with personal experience would reject appropriate accommodations for overlapping protected characteristics. This discussion must be conducted without shame on both sides. Helen Eddy's organization had been consulted by BAFTA months earlier regarding the release of the film, but somehow their contributions to the logistics of the live event did not make it into the final production Bible, as indicated by the leaked PDF I mentioned. The financial consequences of this fiasco are already alarming, and the numbers clearly show why the solutions are progressing so slowly. Industry analysts from Parrot Analytics and Ampere Analysis predict that the global streaming value of I Swear could rise to over $125 million in the next 18 months solely due to the ongoing discussion. According to reports, Netflix and Prime Video are in a bidding war to extend their licensing windows after Robert Aramayo's Oscar win for Best Actor sent completion rates soaring. Kirk Jones's production company, which nearly went bankrupt during filming, is now receiving offers for its next 3 projects with fees of over $15 million each, all because the controversy has turned a modest indie film into a cultural flashpoint. On the other hand, BAFTA sponsorship contracts with brands like Jaguar Land Rover and Moet Hennessy are currently being quietly renegotiated. Insiders from these companies report that the diversity and inclusion officials are demanding clauses for future events that include external risk assessments regarding neurodiversity following this debacle. BBC's advertising revenue from the repeat of the show on iPlayer temporarily dropped when the full version was removed. However, the edited clips and the subsequent discussion generated more traffic for the news site, so the whole matter ultimately resulted in a gain in clicks despite the loss of trust. The impact on families is the part that no one films, but in the industry, it is discussed behind closed doors. Whispers are exchanged in the quiet corners of Soho House and Chateau Marmont. Delroy Lindo's daughter, who lives in London and followed the ceremony with Jamaican relatives, reportedly broke down. She broke down in tears in the subsequent family chat and told their father that the moment felt like everything we had left England for came back in the worst possible way. Michael B. Jordan's mother, Donna, who had taken him to every audition as a child, sat the next morning. After the call from his team on the plane from Newark, sources from the family environment report that they, during the flight, wrote a private letter to the BAFTA, which her son eventually canceled for her, as he did not want the matter to escalate publicly as long as Sinners was still in production. John Davidson's mother, now in her late 70s and still living in the Scottish borders, gave a reserved interview to a Scottish local newspaper. In it, she said that her son was affected by the global reactions. Devastated but not surprised. He spent the night after the award ceremony in his hotel room, and calming techniques applied that he had learned decades ago, the same ones that had helped him during filming in 1989, when the world first put him in a box. Robert Aramayo's parents in Yorkshire reportedly called him at 3 o'clock in the morning, London time, just to make sure he was doing well. Because winning the award for Best Actor, which should have been a reason to celebrate, was now overshadowed by headlines mentioning his name in connection with the word controversy. New leaks are emerging almost hourly, and the latest from the BAFTA offices at Piccadilly Circus show urgent Zoom conferences of the board that lasted into the early hours of February 24. Kwame Kwei-Armah vehemently urged for an independent review panel with representatives from both Black British creatives and Tourette support groups, while Ama Asante called for immediate policy changes, such as mandatory impact audits for all guests with documented vocal tics. A voice message from the conference that was leaked by an angry board member documents Ama Asante's words. We cannot celebrate the breakthrough of one community by demanding another to silently endure its discomfort. That is not progress, that is a trade of pain for pain. The board ultimately decided to commission the review, but postponed the announcement until after the weekend to avoid appearing reactive, a classic chess move that only fueled the outrage further. Social media turned it into its own monster. Algorithms on X, TikTok and Instagram served users the clip based on their previous interest in content related to disability or racial justice. This created bizarre echo chambers, where one side only perceived accusations of ableism and the other only perceived racist ignorance. TikTok creators with millions of followers, such as neurodiversity activist at Actual Autistic and Proud and Black film critic at Real Black Truth, went live one after the other and together achieved over 50 million views with their duets. They analyzed the exact wording of the joint statement, line by line, and pointed out how the term complex overlap was used to obscure the concrete failure. The trending topics on X were divided into BAFTA shame and support Tourettes. Both activities identified by third parties surged in the area of hashtags supporting people with disabilities. This indicates a coordinated counter-reaction from interest groups that had been prepared for months by the press campaign I Swear. Possible legal escalations are already being prepared by senior representatives from both sides. The British Commission for Equality and Human Rights has launched a preliminary investigation after 3 black spectators filed complaints. They stated that the lack of appropriate measures had created a hostile atmosphere. The lead attorney, David Isaac, former chairman of the commission, is reportedly reviewing the case personally. The organization Tourette's Action has commissioned a renowned lawyer from Matrix Chambers to draft a defense document in case a lawsuit attempts to portray the condition itself as the problem rather than the planning failure. In the USA, the NAACP is consulting with Jordan's team about its entertainment working group. However, a lawsuit filing is not imminent, as a source put it. No one wants to act as the accuser of a disabled activist, even if the actual defendant is the institution that has failed. Extreme cases and hypothetical scenarios currently dominate the industry's podcasts and private dinners. What if, for example, the tics had provoked another insult against a different protected group? Would the reaction have been faster or slower depending on the cultural situation in 2026? Or imagine if Delroy Lindo had visibly reacted on stage instead of maintaining his usual composure. If the cameras had been zoomed in closer, would he have been named in the explanation? Or would the reporting have shifted to disruption of the ceremony? These what-if scenarios reveal the patchwork of current policies, where exceptions are based more on public attention and lobbying than on a uniform risk matrix. The related question of how AI-generated deepfake tics or synthetic voices could complicate this issue in future films is already being discussed in development meetings in 2027. Studios are adding clauses for uncontrollable performance elements to their contracts after witnessing the rapid development of this story. The long-term effects on the careers of all those involved will be noticeable. Robert Aramayo's agents at CAA are already receiving offers that triple his previous fee. However, with the condition that sensitivity advisors must be present at each set, that the award for Best Actor is now sometimes marked with a question mark in some casting rooms. Kirk Jones has arranged talks with all major streaming services for his next project, a follow-up drama about another misunderstood illness. Insiders report, however, that he claims full control over live performances for all actors with a similar profile. Amanda Berry's upcoming chairmanship is being critically scrutinized by major donors who want to assure themselves that the committee actually has authority and is not just another report gathering dust in the drawer. Tim Davie from the BBC is under internal pressure from his own diversity council, who demands a complete review of all 2026 broadcast delays and their selective application in an internal letter. The Tourette community is anything but uniform. Older activists see John Davidson as a hero whose decades of work outweigh a single bad evening, while younger voices on platforms like Reddit's Tourettes argue that true engagement means acknowledging when adjustments fail and harm others. A well-known young activist named Sam O'Neill, who runs the TikTok account at Tics That Teach with over 800,000 followers, published a video that went viral in which he said, "John Davidson paved the way for all of us, but having paved the way does not mean that we can ignore the hurdles we create for other communities. True solidarity means better planning, not defensive statements." This statement resonated with many neurodiverse creatives that are now advocating for cross-community protocols instead of zero-sum defenses. The debates over policy changes are intensifying throughout the 2026-2027 award calendar. The Oscars have already quietly released drafts for guidelines. The voting risk assessments for all live guests include a direct response to the failure of the BAFTA guidelines. The Association of Foreign Press of the Golden Globes is considering adding a representative for neurodiversity to its production team. After the board itself witnessed how quickly the story spread and how it affected the global perception of the credibility of British awards, even smaller festivals like Sundance and Tribeca are updating their information packages for artists and add questions about tic disorders and sensory needs. What was once just a footnote is now an integral part of the checklist, as no one wants to be the next cautionary example. The long-term personal impacts extend far beyond the immediate headlines, and also touch the quiet moments that never make it into the gossip columns. Delroy Lindo is said to have confided in close friends that he's contemplating a chapter in his memoirs, that this night is thematized as part of his broader reflections on transatlantic black art. He wants to use the experience to highlight the inequalities that still exist even after 40 years in show business, Michael B. Jordan's production company Outlier Society is reportedly developing a short film series on intersectional solidarity. The first episode is loosely inspired by the BAFTA moment, but staged in the form of a fictional award ceremony to avoid direct naming while still sparking discussion. John Davidson himself keeps extremely reserved. His management rejects any major interview requests while he processes the global attention with his longtime therapist, who has turned his life's work into a battlefield. The machine continues to run relentlessly, but the cracks are now clearly visible compared to 48 hours ago. Every new leak, every named manager, every projected amount, every whispered family message contributes to the betrayal that started with a single loud word and expanded into a kind of referendum on whose suffering is prioritized in the spotlight and at the highest stakes. The next award season is already being reshaped in the boardrooms from Los Angeles to London. Names like Amanda Berry, Tim Davie, Kwame Kwei-Armah, and Ama Asante are closely watching every step they take, as the whole world is watching and eagerly waiting to see if the promises of improved security measures are sincere, or just empty promises to continue rolling out the red carpets and cashing the checks. Here begins the story, no longer just about one night, but about the entire system that made this possible. From the calculations that presented a certain version of the story about balanced respect, from the silence that spoke louder than any apology. The dirt we uncover here at Dirty Hollywood is not limited to what was shouted in this lavish hall, but also concerns the silent decisions made in offices and Zoom conferences that determined whose voice carried more weight at the crucial moment. And the last, ugliest layer of all, which connects every name, every dollar, every family tier, has yet to come to light. For when we lift the curtain on the long-term game, revealing the true motives, the cover-up attempts that are already planned for 2027, then the overall picture of this corrupt industry will be sharp like a crime scene photo under black light. Stay tuned, because the final part of this investigation will hit us harder than anything we have uncovered so far. And when we look at the big picture, the true motives behind every decision, the cover-up attempts already planned for the 2027 season, only then does the whole ugly picture of this global entertainment giant emerge like a crime scene in the harsh light of an interrogation room, smelling of stale cigarettes and despair. Imagine the crisis meetings taking place in the elegant glass offices of the BAFTA headquarters on Piccadilly, where Amanda Berry is on the phone in the middle of the night with her closest circle, including heavyweights like producer Gabrielle Tana and director Steve McQueen, to negotiate the conditions for the independent advisory board, from which they hope to take time until the situation calms down. Gabrielle Tana, the Oscar-nominated producer of The King's Speech, who has joined the committee to enhance its prestige, is pushing for a committee led by an external consultant from McKinsey's diversity department. Such a step may sound good, but it guarantees that the recommendations will be diluted to mere recommendations instead of binding rules. Steve McQueen, the acclaimed director of 12 Years a Slave and the Small Axe series, urges caution in these discussions. He argues that anything less than a complete public examination with named accountability for Sarapat's decisions would resemble an old-fashioned extortion model. However, his initiative is overruled by the majority, which fears alienating the Tourette lobby that has significantly contributed to the successes of I Swear and the associated funding from the Disability Arts Program, which amounts to millions annually. Tim Davie from the BBC is trying to contain the damage from his office in Portland Place. His program director Charlotte Moore is drafting an internal memo to all broadcast producers that mandates intersectional risk assessments for every live event featuring known neurodiverse guests. However, the memo contains a huge gap. The analyses are only advisory when the guest is involved in an award-winning project, essentially a free pass for similar situations. Charlotte Moore, who approved the original protocol for 2-hour delays in 2024, is now quietly meeting with the media regulator Ofcom to preempt formal investigations. It offers a voluntary equality audit in broadcasting that will last 18 months and whose results are to be kept confidential until after the next awards ceremony. The true motive becomes crystal clear when you trace the flow of money. The renewal of the BBC Charter is up for review in 2027, and the last thing Tim Davie needs is a public scandal that gives the conservative press ammunition to demand more control over woke broadcasting. Therefore, the plan is to present this as a one-time learning experience, while the responsibility is quietly shifted to BAFTA with the hope that funding for art projects for people with disabilities remains intact. On the other side of the Atlantic in Los Angeles, the wave hits the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences like a freight train. President Janet Yang and CEO Bill Kramer are already in close sessions with their own production committee, reviewing each guest list for the upcoming Governors Awards and the Oscars 2027. To include a brand new clause in the invitation packages, mandatory medical disclosure forms prior to the event for any voting or behavioral disturbances, complete with required acoustic zone plans and spotter teams on site, funded by a new emergency budget of $10 million sourced from sponsor reserves. Janet Yang, the former producer who guided the Academy through the reforms after Me Too, reportedly informed her team that in the year that was supposed to serve as a recovery after the controversies of the BAFTA Awards 2025, they cannot afford any image damage like at the BAFTAs. Bill Kramer is pushing for partnerships with neurodiversity organizations such as the Autism Society and the Tourette Syndrome Association to collaboratively develop the new guidelines, but only after the legal department has signed airtight liability waivers that protect the Academy from future claims. Behind it lies pure self-preservation. The broadcasting contract for the Oscars with ABC is worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually, and any decline in viewership due to alienation could trigger renegotiations that would cost the Academy tens of millions in revenue. Therefore, there is an attempt to overreact publicly while the actual power structures remain untouched behind the scenes. The financial winners and losers are already being determined in the back rooms of talent agencies and studio finance departments, and the outcome is devastating. Kirk Jones's production company has experienced an estimated increase in value of $40 million in just the last 48 hours. Both CAA and WME have made seven-figure offers for its next three projects, all of which are based on stories about misunderstood conditions. The studios are now eager to realize these projects, as the controversy has proven to be a lucrative marketing tool. Robert Aramayo's offer has tripled overnight. His agents at CAA have booked him for leading roles in the flagship series of three major streaming services. Every contract includes a clause for illness sensitivity consultants on set, for which studios are willing to pay extra, as it helps them protect against similar PR pitfalls. On the losing side, the main sponsors of the BAFTA, such as Jaguar Land Rover and Moet Hennessy, are quietly demanding renegotiated clauses in their contracts for 2027 that include exit options in the event of another incident. The Jaguar's diversity officer sent an internal email stating, "We cannot associate our brand with events that risk alienating key consumer groups without ironclad safeguards. This potentially means millions in lost sponsorship revenue for the Academy if it delays the reforms." The psychological consequences for those affected are never addressed in the glossy reports. Currently, numerous therapists in London and Los Angeles are employed. Delroy Lindo's longtime acting coach in New York has reportedly scheduled additional sessions this week to help him process the revived feelings of alienation in his own country that the night triggered in him. In doing so, he draws on decades of transatlantic experience that now feel painfully relevant again. Michael B. Jordan's personal trainer and mental coach are adjusting his preparation plan for Sinners to plan for more recovery days, as the constant video repeats on his social networks are affecting his concentration during the fight choreography. The coach told close friends, "The body remembers every little movement even when the mind perseveres." John Davidson, the man at the center of the events, is being cared for by his longtime therapist in Edinburgh in collaboration with a specialist team to cope with the flood of hate messages mixed with hero worship. Techniques are used that were developed after the documentary film from 1989 to rebuild the mental barriers that enable him to present himself effectively in public. Even Alan Cumming, the host who had to speak these lines on stage, is said to have turned to his own therapist in New York to hold emergency meetings because he feels like the scapegoat for decisions that went far beyond his competencies due to the backlash from both sides. The cross-community initiatives that emerged after the events are the only glimmer of hope for real progress. But even these are co-opted by the system before they can truly take effect. A group of black British filmmakers led by director Ama Asante and writer Kwame Arma has founded the ad hoc coalition Intersectional Safeguards Now, and is already planning a summit in April 2026 at the British Film Institute. Representatives from Tourette's Action, the Disability Arts Alliance, and the NAACP Entertainment Task Force are invited. The goal is to create a joint guideline for best practices in live events. Insiders report, however, that the coalition is already under pressure from major donors. They want to soften the wording mandatory accountability to recommended best practices in order not to deter sponsors. Ama Asante vehemently resists in the planning emails and insists that every document would be worthless without enforceable consequences for institutions like BAFTA and the BBC, but the threads of financing are being pulled by the same people who benefited from the original silence. With an eye on the year 2027, the entire awards calendar is being quietly restructured. That will change the atmosphere of these evenings for years. The Foreign Press Association of the Golden Globes is expanding its production team with a representative for neurodiversity. This person reports directly to the board and has veto power over seat assignments if risks are identified. The Venice and Cannes film festivals are updating their contracts for artist support and adding clauses for uncontrollable performance elements with financial penalties for non-compliance. And add clauses for uncontrollable performance elements with financial penalties for non-compliance. This is a direct response to the BAFTA precedent, which makes festival directors fear similar viral incidents on the red carpet or at press conferences. Even the smaller yet influential festivals, Sundance and Tribeca, require all artists with known illnesses to participate in a simulation day before the event. There, potential outbreaks are modeled and countermeasures are tested. The costs will be covered by a new industry-wide insurance pool of the Motion Picture Association. The cover-up strategies planned for 2027 are the most frightening part of it, because they show how quickly the system learns to protect itself. PR agencies that have already handled previous scandals of major studios are commissioned by BAFTA and the BBC to develop a campaign for realigning the narrative that will be rolled out in phases. First, a meticulously produced documentary film about the power of authentic representation featuring John Davidson and Robert Aramayo, funded by the same grants for art from people with disabilities. Then follow opinion pieces from sympathetic journalists who portray the incident as a necessary discussion that has advanced the dialogue. Finally, a high-profile panel discussion is planned at the BAFTAs 2027. Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo are invited as honorary guests to exemplify healing and unity. The subtext, however, is that participation signals forgiveness and allows everyone to continue without real structural changes. The leaked presentation for this campaign, which was sent to me by a disillusioned junior account manager, contains a slide titled Realignment of Stakeholders, which lists exact dollar amounts for community donations to Tourette organizations and film funds for Black British films. Essentially, silence is being bought with money, while the core power structures remain intact. The broader cultural impacts of the year 2026 are already changing film development and marketing. Studios add so-called intersectionality impact reports to each project application, documents of 50 pages, the creation of which costs six-figure amounts, which however mostly serve more as legal safeguards than as genuine tools for better storytelling. Development executives at Netflix and Warner Brothers are now demanding that screenwriters incorporate conflict scenarios into every script featuring neurodiverse characters. A bureaucratic hurdle that slows everything down but provides the legal departments with arguments in the event of another incident. Psychological research is also booming. Universities in the UK and the USA are rapidly approving new research grants to investigate the effects of coprolalia at public events on overlapping identities. These studies will take years, but they conveniently provide new citations for future statements when the next controversy arises. The actual motive underlying all of this will never be openly admitted by the industry to maintain the illusion of progress, and at the same time, maintain the hierarchies that ensure money continues to flow in the same direction. Every new protocol, every review panel, every goodwill donation is designed to look like change. without actually redistributing power or the leaders at the top giving up even a cent or a fraction of control. Amanda Berry can begin her term as chair with a bold reform agenda. Tim Davie keeps his license renewal on track. Kirk Jones and Robert Aramayo are riding the wave of success and securing higher fees. And black talents like Jordan and Lindo are expected to accept the invitation to the reconciliation panel as proof that the system works. The dirt is never removed, but only covered up with a new layer of shiny press releases and sponsored content. This is the machinery in its purest form that I have been exposing on this channel since day one. The actual crime is not the outbreak itself, but the cold, calculating way in which the system decides whose pain takes priority, whose story is protected, and whose discomfort is filed under lessons learned, while the checks are cashed and the red carpets are rolled out. At the BAFTA Awards 2026, it was never about a Scottish activist or two American stars. It was a stress test for the entire global entertainment complex. And his reaction revealed everything about who really has the power when the spotlight is brightest and the stakes are highest. The cover-ups are already underway, the narratives are being rewritten, the money is being moved, but the truth is still there. Raw and unfiltered, because that's exactly what we do at Dirty Hollywood. We dig until the dirt can no longer be buried. If you're still in after all that and just as angry about this calculated betrayal as I am, then you already know what's coming next. Subscribe to the channel now if you haven't already, because we're just getting started. Give us a like if you're tired of the polished lies. Write in the comments below who I should investigate next, whether it's the next Oscar disaster or the dark secrets of an A-list celebrity. And if you have insider information about this story or other dirty corners of Hollywood, send it to me. Absolute anonymity is guaranteed. Here is your Strange saying goodbye from this gloomy little studio. Stay dirty, stay awake, and we'll see you in the next episode. Strange is signing off.